You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome to On the Way. This is Beth White, your host this morning for our monthly radio show from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship. And welcome to all of you watching on YouTube or listening to our podcast. We are so grateful that you take your time out of your day to listen to the stories and what's happening over here in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So today, we're going to have a little different show. So the first half of the show, we're going to talk about Renew My Church, kind of where we're at in the process, and continue that conversation about building the new realities. So first up, I'm going to have Father Jason Malave, who's the Cardinal's Liaison for Renew My Church. On the second half of the show, we're going to focus on preparing for Lent. It's upon us, believe it or not. And Jen Delvo from our office is going to be interviewing an author of a book, Ashes to Hope, I believe is the name. And she has pre-recorded that, so we're going to move into that after this conversation. So welcome, Father Jason.
Thank you, Beth. Really a joy and an honor to be with the show again. It's been a joy talking about the renewal process for the last, I think it's been 5-6 years.
I know, right? It's kind of crazy. So you, most of the time when people think about Renew My Church, they think about what we would term the decision and discernment phase. So I know you've been really steeped in that. You've been at a lot of the evenings where announcements are made. You've walked with people along the way. So could you just share with our listeners where we are in that process?
It was almost 6 years ago, the Cardinal divided the Archdiocese into 100 groupings with the invitation over time to have conversations amongst those groupings about the right structure for those parishes. And we know that over the last 5-6 years, many parishes have gone through some significant changes. We are, by the grace of God, coming to the last 15 groupings. We'll look at about 9 or 10 groupings towards the end of this academic year. So we'll be finished with those groupings towards May and June of this year. And then there's a small number of groupings up in Vicariate 1, and we'll have conversations with those. But by and large, the discernment and decisions, by and large, will be substantially done by May of 2022.
Wow.
And it really does allow us to get busy on the next part of renewal. Having looked at the structural part of renewal, now we can move on to the building the new reality part of the renewal, which actually gets me out of bed every day.
So before we transition to that, would you just explain to our folks why we started this way? Why did we look at our demographics and our buildings and our structures and our ministries? Why did we start with that whole component before we asked parishes to move into the spiritual renewal side?
Now, that question is what every single parishioner on the grouping teams ask, the same question.
I know.
And the answer that I've shared just about a million times, the headwinds, really, when the Cardinal started the renewal, the headwinds were against us. Mm-hmm. And there's 4 very specific realities that we have to be honest about. One is the number of priests that are available in the Archdiocese of Chicago. Number 2 is the number of people participating in their faith in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And because of that, then the operating budgets are not where they used to be for just maintaining and continuing parishes as we have in the past many decades previously. And so parishioners and money, priests. And the fourth one is just the age and the size and the scope of our campuses. Many of them built around the turn of the century. There was significant millions, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance that was happening. So as the Cardinal looked at calling us to an invitation to discern the right structure, the headwinds were against us, and we had to start with the structure. Would that we began with evangelization. I would have been a fan of that. But the headwinds were against us, and we had to look at the structure, and now can dive deeply into the investigation of our spiritual renewal around evangelization.
And I would say too that we were part of the struggle too is if we didn't do this, there's no way we could have moved out of maintenance, because it was a constant trying to maintain things, right? And so I also, for those who may or may not have been part of the decisions and discernments, part of the decisions and discernments was really to look at who we are as a community and who we're trying to serve, so that when we're ready to move into building the new reality, that we really know why we're doing this. Is that right, Father Jason?
You're absolutely right, Beth. And so many people, when they felt the pain and the loss of, the parishes uniting, and they continue to pray at two different locations, or their parishes uniting and one closing, the only thing that sometimes comforted the hearts of those people where their parish closed was the knowledge that this is a structural investigation, and the spiritual renewal, the work of evangelization, was yet to come. And so they bore the pain and the sadness of the closure with the hope and anticipation that our church is going to get stronger. And so many people had that on their heart as they made that transition and united themselves at one or the two locations.
And so I do know about your retreats that you would put people through. So what was the sort of the imagery, the way that you animated the sort of as we're entering Lent towards Easter? What was that, just for our listeners, what was that process of you invited them to think about?
In the very initial phase, we didn't help people on their spiritual understanding of this journey, but around wave 2 or wave 3, we invited all the participants from all the groupings. So not only the pastors of the parishes, but their representatives, 4 or 5 or 6 representatives. We invited all the representatives and the grouping team members to participate in a retreat. And it was very basically a journey through the Paschal mystery. What is the Paschal mystery? It's a reminder. It's the reality of Jesus's birth, his life, specifically his death and resurrection. And so very intentionally and very honestly, people walk through how our lives mirror or match Jesus's life itself. So how we in our own life experience the gift of life, we experience suffering, we experience sometimes death in relationships, death in family structures, physical death of loved ones. But Jesus also desires for us resurrection. And that's uniquely Christian, and it's uniquely because of Christ's own journey, of his own passion, death, and resurrection, that we might experience our own suffering, death, and resurrection while we're here on earth, until one day we experience the resurrection in the kingdom of paradise. People they're kind of startled at how honestly and how beautifully we connected our journey here on earth with what Jesus went through. They were a little bit startled at that, and it brought a lot of tears, because what they were thinking about was not their parish, the loss of their mom 6 years ago, or the loss of a child 10 years ago, or the hopefulness they found after divorce. And they found themselves really acknowledging the pain that they experienced, but really moving into where they found Jesus's love in the midst of the resurrection. And it was really a great experience for folks on the retreat.
And so a lot of times when we're looking at some of these places where they've had to unify, so there is a loss. Someone's going to lose a pastor, because when there's a unification, there's usually one pastor. They may lose their building. And even those who unify, they lament losing community, because the community now changes. There's different people coming. And so I think what's really important is that we think about I love to think about Holy Saturday. And it's that liminal time in between. So sometimes we're in this painful grieving place and we can't yet see what's to come. And so I think what we've built into the structure of building the new reality is sort of the hope for what's to come. So could you share with us a little bit about what, in some parishes, they need to go through this phase. They go through decision discernment. They need to go through the operations transition. So if there was a change, they've got to get a new name, a tax ID number. They got to get a new website. They got to do all those things. And then they end up in building the new reality. So when you said it gets you up in the morning, what's exciting to you about building the new reality?
If I could just build off of your Holy Saturday for a second,
Sure.
because sometimes that Holy Saturday, that waiting period in between death and resurrection, sometimes for newly united parishes, that waiting period is a year
Yes.
or 2 years.
Yes.
But what's really powerful, it's been a privilege to be with many communities when they've had a glimpse of what the resurrection could look like. They just get a glimpse at one Mass, and sometimes that takes the form of a unity Mass where people come together, and all of a sudden people are looking around, and for the first time in a long time, the church is full.
Yeah.
Another glimpse of the resurrection is when they celebrate their new name. And I've been part of celebrations when they've celebrated the new name of Blessed Carlo Acutis. And all the kids are there, and all the kids are transformed by the experience of seeing this young saint there before them, and that they too might one day be a saint on their faith journey. Or Mother Teresa celebration when we named a parish after Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta. So while they're in the Saturday for a while, there's moments and glimpses of the resurrection that they're moving towards over time. So I like that image. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Mm-hmm.
Holy Saturday. So what gets me up in the morning? As a pastor, I've seen the beauty of fully alive parishes and fully alive parishioners. I've seen the beauty of that. When you get a family and they're there celebrating the first communion of their child, and they're back the next day. First communion's on Saturday, and they come back on Sunday, and then they're the following Sunday. And I've been blessing the forehead of this kid for 7 years. I've been when they come up for communion, and they're with their parents. The parents put their kid first, and the kid crosses his arms. I've been blessing the forehead of this child for 7 years. And then finally, I'm able to offer the child the body of Christ, and their eyes light up, and that whole relationship changes, and they're receiving something they've been so desirous of for 7 years of their life, and they're back the next Sunday and the next. So there's something really vibrant and beautiful and full and rich and dynamic about that kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. But as pastor, I've also seen the opposite, right? Mm-hmm. Where you don't know who the kid is that you give first communion to, and you never see them again, ever. So what I like about building a new reality is there's what makes me get out of bed in the morning is the hope and the drive and the movement towards an intentionality about wanting that life-giving relationship of Jesus for everybody, for everyone in the parish across the board, and calling people and reintroducing people to that beautiful relationship with Jesus, such that it could be life-giving, as life-giving for the parents as it is for that little child who's been getting the blessing for 7 years and finally receives the body of Christ. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what building the new reality really is a deeper relationship with our generous God, with Jesus who he sent among us, and the Holy Spirit who continues to inspire us and transform us as our generous God. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
So we're going to take a break right now, and we will be back to continue our conversation with Father Jason.
At Catholic Charities, we fight hunger in Chicago throughout the year. Our 6 regional offices in Cook and Lake counties work together to offer sit-down and to-go meals to anyone in need. We deliver meals to those who are homebound and our 8 food pantries offer 3 to 4 days of food supplies based on household size. Participants in these programs have the opportunity to learn about other Catholic charity services that strengthen individuals, families, and their communities. The challenges for those dealing with food insecurity are especially great during the winter months. To learn how you can help those who are hungry in your neighborhood, visit CatholicCharities.net or call 312-655-7525. That's 312-655-7525. Thank you for your generosity.
We are at the Most Blessed Trinity Parish Food Pantry in Waukegan.
And here we care for people in need. There was definitely an uptick in the needs for services.
We doubled our volume after COVID hit, from servicing about 250 families a week to about 500 a week. We supply bread, tortillas, vegetables, milk, cheese, butter, proteins, fish, chicken, eggs.
Well, the annual Catholic Appeal has been a tremendous help to us, especially over the past year and a half.
Without the annual Catholic Appeal, we might have to close our doors. Our parish is the largest one in the Archdiocese, but is very poor. We think about food and we think about nourishment, but we also nourish the soul, provide that connection to humanity.
The good works here are made possible through the annual Catholic Appeal. Make your gift at annualcatholicappeal.com.
Ancestry and genealogy are more important every day. People all over the world are wanting to learn more about their family heritage for personal and for health reasons. At Catholic Charities, we are hearing from adults who lived for a brief time at St. Vincent's Orphanage, the wonderful life-affirming agency that operated out of our headquarters for 91 years, serving thousands of women, children, and families until it closed in 1972. Our post-adoption services help adults who want to learn more about their experience at St. Vincent's. Our compassionate staff members provide whatever family background information they can offer, along with support and reunion services. To learn more, call 312-655-7093. That's 312-655-7093. The spirit of St. Vincent's lives on in the inspiring stories that continue to emerge today.
Welcome back to On the Way. This is Beth White. I am talking with Father Jason Malave, who is the Cardinal's Liaison for Renew My Church. And we are talking about Renew My Church and building the new reality. So Father Jason was just sharing with us what gets us up and what helps him get up in the morning, or what gets him up in the morning. So Father Jason, when we talk about building the new reality, we talk a lot about discipleship, missionary discipleship. But one of the things that I have really started honing in on is this sense of, folks sometimes think that this is one more thing we want them to do. And I think we've come to realize through the Spirit ourselves that this isn't something else we're due. It's actually what we're called to do as a church, right? This is actually our mission, is to make disciples and spread the gospel, right? And so when you talked before, you said about having a personal relationship with Jesus and things like that. So could you share with our listeners what that means, the sense of discipleship, missionary discipleship, having a personal relationship? How is that different than what we've already been doing? I know that was a very big question.
It's the question. It's the question for all of us. I'm a lifelong Catholic. I was baptized as a baby, the whole 9 yards. Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, Catholic college, Catholic seminary, graduate school. Yet I have to say that as the Cardinal called us to this time of renewal, the relationship and the idea that we are disciples of Jesus struck me newly. I have to say that. I've been a priest at the time, I'd been a priest for 19 years. But the relationship with Jesus as his disciple really struck me personally newly. And I started thinking about, here I've been celebrating Mass for 19 years in persona Christi, but yet still the image or the relationship with Jesus as his disciple, sitting at the foot of the Master, matching my life after the Master, who's Jesus, working on this discipleship for the rest of my life. It struck me newly. And I'm happy for the opportunity to talk about it and witness to it, because I'd always been a Catholic before then. I'd been a parishioner. I'd been a priest. So those were some of my relationships. That's how I saw myself in relationship to God, as a Catholic, as a parishioner, then as a priest. But to call myself a disciple, and remember that as a disciple, my whole life has to match the Master's, Jesus's. Oh, Beth, that was like, I'll tell you, 6 years ago, it was like a bright light went off. And it started with that book called Intentional Discipleship. That's what started for me. And then soon after, there was this whole explosion of this conversation around discipleship. And one of the three taglines of Renew My Church is making disciples. It really meant, Malave, you have better look at how you are as a disciple of Jesus. Yes, you're a priest, and yes, you're a Catholic, and yes, you're a parishioner, a Chicagoan, a Cubs fan, sometimes a Sox fan. I support both our Chicago teams. I'm sorry. But first and foremost, most importantly, the relationship that God's going to take a look at, and the relationship that he's going to hold us to, is, did you follow my son? Did you follow after him? Did you match your life to Jesus's? Were you loving like he was? Were you forgiving like he was? Were you generous like he was? Were you selfless like he was? Were you hopeful like he was, offering you the resurrection? Did you match your life to my son Jesus? Is what God's going to ask me. Or if I see Jesus face to face, do I know you? Do I recognize in you a little bit of what you saw in me? Do I know you? And I want to be able to say, yes, I knew you. And I was, and I am your disciple. And then Pope Francis comes out and pushes us even further, saying discipleship is great, but actually Pope Francis calls us to missionary discipleship, moving beyond ourselves into the world around us to share the good news of Jesus. I'll tell you, Beth, my last 6 years as a priest has been changed by this whole relationship of what it means to be Jesus's disciple and work on sharing his joy and his love with those beyond us as a missionary disciple. So yeah, it's been a big move in my own life personally.
So when someone's hearing this right now, what did you do to grow in your relationship as a disciple? What were some of the practical steps?
One was my prayer. My prayer changed. It was, I've been doing my regular prayer, 3 times a day, doing my regular prayer, trying to get it to those as often as possible. But besides the regular prayer, I really found myself using that image to connect myself with the Master, with Jesus, our Savior, whom we love, connecting ourselves, being full of gratitude to our generous God, and asking that the Spirit continue to move in my heart. So I think that's the first way it manifested itself. First of all, I had to bring it into my head and my heart. This whole relationship with Jesus, it had to touch me in my brain and my heart, first of all. And then I found it first affecting my relationship into prayer. And then my relationship with others. Again, are you loving as I loved you? Are you forgiving as I forgive you? And the majority of the time I can say yes, I'm practicing my discipleship. There's still, though, the times that discipleship is a high bar. It's a really high bar, and I find myself falling short, which is a reminder that this is a lifelong journey of discipleship. It's nothing that's, you can punch the card and say, I'm done, because it's really a lifelong journey. And thanks be to God for the forgiveness that Jesus offers us and the chance to start anew and keep moving forward.
What is your understanding of why Pope Francis is saying to us, yes, be disciples, but you also have to be a missionary disciple? Why is he pushing us into that from your perspective?
It would seem that Pope Francis, I would say rightly, recognizes the fact that we can live our discipleship in a little bit of a bubble. Meaning we can pray really well, we can serve, our parish or our family we can share our time, talent, and treasure. But my sense is that he's asking us to do that beyond just ourselves. Mm-hmm. So not only pray, but also pray with others. If somebody shares with you, their mom passed away or their dad passed away or somebody's in the hospital, can I pray with you? Generous God, send down your healing touch upon Mary's mother who's in the hospital looking for healing. We know that you have the healing power to send upon Mary's mom. Please send that. So can you pray with others? Can you extend that prayer not just by yourself but also with others? Can you serve with that real sense of missionary discipleship and serving sometimes beyond our comfort zones? I'll serve sometimes where it's easy, going beyond where it's easy, where I'm uncomfortable. I think that's where the Pope is calling us to, serving when it's even uncomfortable. And then not only sharing our time, talent, and treasure, but also sharing our faith. Sharing the way Jesus touches our own hearts and our own lives. How are we called to share not just our time, talent, and treasure, which is a gift, but also sharing our faith in small faith groups, sharing our faith with our neighbors, witnessing to the power of God in our own lives. So I really sense that Pope Francis is calling us out of that bubble and into an opportunity to pray with others, serve even when it's uncomfortable, and pray and also share not just our time, talent, and treasure, but also our faith with those whom we encounter every day. I think that's what he's calling us to.
And Father Jason, we don't have a lot of time left, so it can't be a really long answer, but our world, as Catholics, we don't talk about our faith. It just isn't something that we do. And so we're really stretching people to say, you need to talk about your faith. Why is that necessary in today's world? Why didn't we need to do that 40 years ago? But why do we need to do that now?
40 years ago, our culture was so radically Catholic. We were really living in an age of Christendom, where Christianity and Catholicism was par for course. It was the religion of the.
You went to church on Sunday. No, everybody went to church on Sunday, right?
We would just get in line behind everyone walking down the street going to church on Sunday. That's how it was. It's not where we are today. It's just our culture has shifted so radically. And so we have to go back and practice what really the early disciples, what the apostles did. And they shared their faith in Jesus, person by person by person by person. So we find ourselves in what's called a new apostolic or new missionary age, where we're really going to have to share that with one another. And sometimes it's as simple as sharing with your kids why, as parents, you baptized your children. I was hopeful. I was hopeful for you as my firstborn, my secondborn, my thirdborn. I was hopeful, and I wanted you to have what I had, which was a deep relationship with God, maybe not so deep with Jesus, but it's growing deeper with Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And so sometimes it's just a matter of witnessing to the power of God moving in your own life. That's sharing your faith.
Yeah, and people don't always recognize that. I mean, we believe the Holy Spirit is working in everybody's life at any given moment, right? And we can't control the Spirit wherever the Spirit goes. But sometimes you wouldn't recognize that. You might think it's a coincidence or something, right? Oh, we got to go, Father Jason. I could talk to you all day. So thank you so much. Up next is Jen Delvo with an interview with Paul Jarzembowski, who's the author of Hope from the Ashes. Thank you again.
Hello, and and welcome to On the Way, the show of the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship at the Archdiocese of Chicago. I'm Jen Delvo, Senior Coordinator there, and today I am very excited to have as a guest for this segment Paul Jarzembowski, who is a friend and a person that I have known for quite a while now in ministry, and particularly in previous iterations of youth and young adult ministry in particular. But we're excited to have you here, Paul, and you serve currently as the Associate Director of Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. But the exciting thing that we want to talk about today is actually your brand new book, and you are the author of Hope from the Ashes. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me. I'm originally a Chicagoland native, so it's I already feel I feel at home.
Well, you definitely feel at home with the massive amounts of snow and cold we've been having this month. So, we always like to hear a little bit of people's stories. Being in evangelization and missionary discipleship, we think that how we got to the point we're at, what motivates us in our faith is such a crucial part of anything that we do in ministry. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more than just your title with us.
I'd be glad to. So for me, a lot of my work has been involved with young people. In the Chicagoland area, I was a parish, college campus, and the diocesan leader in both youth and young adult ministry and campus ministries. And so this is very much on my heart. I grew up in the area, and for me, Lent has always been a bit of a passion for me. When I was younger, I was that kid in high school and in college who I put on a passion play for my parish. And in fact, when I was in college, I was looking for a bunch of guys to be Roman soldiers. And so I invited my fraternity brothers. I was like, hey, you want to hold a spear and a sword and dress in a Roman soldier outfit? They were like, yeah, that'd be great. So, Lent has always been an interesting part of my life. And then as a minister, that's one of the things that I kept noticing is that, especially with young adults, that every Ash Wednesday, the church would be crowded with a lot of new faces I wouldn't see. And I would notice this year after year. And I thought to myself, I should do something about that. And so writing the book for me was my way to say, I'm going to do something about that.
So this, I really resonate with that. I mean, I love the one advantage of social media is you always get the throwback pictures, and, every Lent there would come the day when the entire back of my SUV would be full of the costumes for the Living Way of the Cross that the teens did. And, you'd be driving down the road and people would be like, why does she have spears in her car? This is a little concerning. I think that sometimes we can get so caught up as people who work for the church, in the logistics and the massive amount of effort that it takes to pull off Ash Wednesday. Having worked in large suburban parishes and a stint at Holy Name Cathedral, those major liturgy days can be really overwhelming. So sometimes it can be really challenging to think creatively when you're just kind of trying to survive the day. And so that was one of the things I really appreciate about your book is that it talks about why this is important and then goes into a lot of really practical details. So I'd love to first talk about kind of that why component. There was a question really early on in the book that really hit me, that what if people on Ash Wednesday felt they truly belong in the community? We've spent a lot of time on the show and in our office's work talking about belonging, and a lot of people kind of dismiss it as not really that important. But yet this seems a very central question to your whole book. And I'm curious why you feel like that is such an important question.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite reasons that when I've done a lot of years of research on this book and asking people why it is that they do reconnect for Ashes, why they do reconnect during the season of Lent, because the numbers are astronomical.
Right.
Relative to the number of people who come on a weekly or even monthly basis, the number of people who come on Ash Wednesday is substantially higher, and the number of people who engage in Lent is even, like in Friday fasting is even bigger. And the one reason that was always given was the fact that that seems to some version of that there's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of, I feel like I'm a part of something bigger than me. That there's this unity. One of the comparisons, I was talking with a sociologist about this, and he compared the ashes to like the I voted stickers on election day, and that on election day, you somewhat you feel like you belong to like the American democratic experience, and so you want to wear the sticker with pride, saying, "Yeah, I belong to that, and I was part of that, and I had my hand in that." And we may not consciously be able to say that, but subconsciously, I think we know that there is a belonging that goes with it. I mean, communities are really built on belonging, that no one ever feels left out. And I think some of the most interesting words we hear about today, especially from young people and those who are less connected to church, is they use words like inclusion and exclusion. And those are other words that mean things around belonging. Yeah. And when people say, "Why don't you come regularly?" is I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I'm included in the good Catholic club. So I don't show up there because church seems like it's a place for perfect people. Right. One person, I stopped a person at the end of an Ash Wednesday Mass and said, "Why are you leaving after the ashes?" Like, not in an accusatory, I'm just kind of curious, like, yeah, what's, do you not, not a parishioner here? Yeah. What's the thing? He's like, this is when he's like, this part of Mass is for the good people, and I'm not. And so he's like, the ashes part, that's totally for me. But the communion part, the Eucharist part, that seems to be for what perfect people do, because all the people who claim they're, to be so perfect, they're the ones who stay. Yeah. And all the ones who I know who are imperfect, they're the ones who don't. So I assume, and that it's an interesting thing, they just don't feel a sense that they belong to this community. And so, but on Ash Wednesday, though, for a few hours, they do sense that belonging. And some even take that, they do stay longer. And if a community is one that they feel connected to, they will stay for that Mass. And they'll even engage throughout Lent, because for some reason, we really convey belonging during this season. And so, it's a critically important, it's perhaps one of the foundational reasons why people reconnect.
Definitely. We talk about it a lot in the different workshops and trainings that we do. And one of the things that we point out is that we often mistake asking somebody to fit in with actually belonging, and that the fitting in component places the burden on the individual coming to us to adapt and to change and to fundamentally change who they are in order to fit in with the community, versus this idea of belonging and hospitality that we're trying to cultivate is instead the community recognizing where the gifts of God are within this person, where the Spirit of God is in this person, and how they can help transform the community. And that's a very challenging paradigm shift for parishes, and I think for individuals too, because when somebody who comes in that their lifestyle, their decisions, and so forth don't match what you expect, don't have maybe those behaviors, it can be very easy to slide into, the judgment component of it. But I think that recognition that by showing up, these individuals are looking for something. And, we so often can dismiss folks who do just come, and the number of homilies you hear or people that are welcoming saying, "Oh, if only you would actually be here every week," or "It's good to see you guys these 2 or 3 times a year," instead of creating that sense of welcome and belonging. And I think that's one of the essence of the book, is that it really conveys what do we wrap around these individuals on that day. What also struck me is that in order to accomplish this belonging, because it's not just something that you can do one-off, but that does take a lot of organization, is the thread of accompaniment. And that doesn't surprise me at all, knowing you, but also knowing where a lot of the conversation in the church is today. And I'd love for you to share kind of how you envision accompaniment wrapping into this Ash Wednesday component.
Well, part of accompaniment means it is really wrapped up in the image of the scriptural image of the walk to Emmaus. And the phrasing that is so often used, and Pope Francis uses this in his exhortation Christus Vivit, it reminds us that Jesus walked in the wrong direction with the disciples as long as they needed to go, not on his watch, but on their watch. And that is a model for us that we talk about on Lent and Ash Wednesday about people coming back to church, but I think an accompaniment model doesn't lean too much in that. And also how can we go out and we go to where they are, where they feel they need to be. So part of the accompaniment also means going, thinking of them not just coming to our place, but when do we go to their place? How do we throughout Lent go to them? And we might say, well, we're not just going to follow people out to their car and then drive behind them on the way home. Like, that's creepy. But, but how can we find out what is in their lives? So one of the practical suggestions I have is, like on that moment of Ash Wednesday, asking people, what is it that we need to pray for? What are the things that are, impacting your life out there, outside the church? And then, with that, if we receive that feedback, if we have prayer cards, if we have things that you can fill out, we can follow up with that, either individually follow up with that person, or in general here, okay, a lot of prayers are for job loss, especially in this pandemic. We're getting a lot of people who, mental health, loneliness, depression, anxiety are rampant. And so if that's what we're receiving, then maybe as a church, we need to accompany people in those human realities that they're going through. So part of it is that. And then, of course, there's just this season of Lent. Ash Wednesday is not it's certainly a key moment, but considering that people are very engaged in the season of Lent, you have 5-6 weeks to continue that journey with people. There is an openness to fasting. There is an openness to spirituality. There's an openness to the sacred that many people who don't normally come do connect with during Lent. So throughout that season, we can keep accompanying them in ways that might be very spiritually enriching for them to know that other people care. That goes back to the belonging, because people, while they're in their world, their realities, they know that someone from the faith community is there for them. So yeah, accompaniment is part of it, and it's patient, it's slow, it takes time, and that's why even my last chapter is on perseverance, because accompaniment is not something one does overnight. It can take many weeks, many years, for it to really take impact.
We're going to take a short break and come back with Paul Jarzembowski.
At Catholic Charities, we fight hunger in Chicago throughout the year. Our 6 regional offices in Cook and Lake counties work together to offer sit-down and to-go meals to anyone in need. We deliver meals to those who are homebound, and our 8 food pantries offer 3 to 4 days of food supplies based on household size. Participants in these programs have the opportunity to learn about other Catholic charity services that strengthen individuals, families, and their communities. The challenges for those dealing with food insecurity are especially great during the winter months. To learn how you can help those who are hungry in your neighborhood, visit CatholicCharities.net or call 312-655-7525. That's 312-655-7525. Thank you for your generosity.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
Welcome back. This is On the Way, and I'm the co-host Jen Delvo from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship, and we're talking today with Paul Jarzembowski, author of Hope from the Ashes. And just before the break, we were talking about accompaniment, and you slid conveniently right into what I wanted to talk about a little bit more of what are some of those ways that we can accompany people, because I found the chapter of being responsive to people had some really fascinating areas to focus on. And I know personally the first one, provide peace, rest, and refuge, deeply spoke to me as I'm in a particularly chaotic season in my own life. But that these kind of struck me because they did run the full gamut from just that sense of calm, which I do always associate with Lent and some of the beautiful prayer experiences that are offered, or creating the space in my own life for that. But that then also talking about different spirituality, talking about even encouragement of the accomplishment of Lenten aspects. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you came to focus on a few of these, and if there's any interesting stories to share from the book.
Well, part of so I would, because this was part of the conversation about young people, whenever I would go and give talks, whenever I would teach classes or just meet with people about this, there was often, we would first talk about what we did before the break, which was kind of the what and the why. Mm-hmm. And it was very fascinating. But then the conversation would quickly lead into, like you had said, what do we do? And so in every presentation, I would actually turn to my audience, to the other person, and say, what have you done? What could we do now, knowing this? What brainstorm do we have? And we would sit down and talk about it, or I'd be at the podium and I'd be writing down exactly what they'd be saying. So a lot of the ideas that are in the book come from people with whom I've had the conversations, who have done these things, or who've lived through, and we've brainstormed, wouldn't it be great if? So that's where a lot of this comes from. And that is something I didn't want to I didn't want to just write about the why, because it's very fascinating. It's thought provoking. But if we don't have what do I do about it afterwards? Then, it's great, but it doesn't take it to that next level. And I think that's where people are looking for. So some of the things, like you mentioned, like providing a sanctuary night at the church, like one of the things that's very common we hear about is this notion of refuge. Lent is a season of refuge, and our churches can be refuge, places of refuge. Literally, in our migration issues, in our issues related to immigration, churches on our borders are refuge centers. There are places where people who are suffering, who are struggling, come to know that they are safe, to know that they are going to be taken care of. In a similar way, Lent provides many of us who are really inundated with many of the struggles throughout our lives. Lent, people often come to Ash Wednesday. They do the Lenten thing, not because they have Catholic guilt and they're trying to get out of jail free card or anything like that. They're coming to Lent because they're looking for refuge. So I'm wondering, what is it about the fact, during Lent and then even beyond Lent, how do we provide sanctuary? One of the ideas I had too is and use jargon that is approachable. So, for instance, having a stress relief night during Lent, having a couple of those, actually, ironically, don't just have one stress relief night, because you probably will stress someone out that they can only make the one time during Lent. So have a couple of them. Don't make it stressful. Have one at night, have one on the weekend, have one during the day, depending on, have one at different times so that everybody, whatever their stress level is, they can come. And during that, pray, have, candlelight, soft music. I mean, use the traditions of our church,
Right.
but invite people through that lens, not just, hey, would you like to have a night with a particular devotion that you might love, but that might be something that might not make any sense to someone who is disconnected. And that's kind of my whole thing, is approach everything in church as if it were like, how would somebody who doesn't know our language, how would they receive it? So how do we need to phrase it in a way that makes sense to them, that makes it accessible? And then if they do come for that moment, whether it's on Ash Wednesday or whether it's any time, like during the year, weddings and funerals, or if they find themselves just connecting to spirituality in small ways, reading their Bible, meeting with groups, talking about God, affirm that, instead of saying, well, it'd be great if you did more, but rather affirming what they are already doing, because that positive response that we can offer will go a long way to making them know that we are safe space and we are someone that they can talk to.
The point that you make about using the language that everyone understands is something we talk about all the time, and it's not only how we talk about things like prayer and are we diving into those devotions, but also, I moved and finally had the opportunity to just be a normal parishioner when I left Holy Name Cathedral to start working for the Arch. And there was an event I wanted to go to, and they said, go to this store, and it had a name, and it's this room with a name. And I'm thinking, I've been coming here on and off for 4 years on off weekends from the cathedral. I have no idea where that room is or that door. So, when we talk about these things, it's not only how are we talking about the prayer experience and the de-stress event, but also can people find the room to go to, without using that insider baseball language. So, that's a part of what we talk about when we think about hospitality is, how approachable is everything. And I love that you even mention, what's the outside of the building looking like? How can people access it, as we now are wading through the snow and so forth, is the sidewalk clear, and salted and so forth. I think that practicalities sometimes can get so lost, but it can have such great ramifications, and
it's the small stuff. The small stuff is sometimes what we often avoid thinking about, but yet it's probably sometimes very impactful. When small stuff is done wrong, it's very impactful.
Yes.
When small stuff goes right, it's smooth and people can move through.
Because it should become that conduit to actually have the experience versus I can't even get in the door, I can't find parking, the perennial Chicago problem. But that whatever that barrier is becomes the barrier versus that entryway. And so I think the nuts and bolts practicality of this really shines. And I know our listeners in some cases are folks who serve in ministry roles. We have some religious and priests who listen. And we also have just, everyday parishioners who sit in the pews and may not be very involved. So if you could come up with maybe one suggestion for a parish person, knowing that we only have a few weeks until Lent actually starts, they couldn't, take on everything in the book. What might be maybe one easy thing that they could try doing as they approach Ash Wednesday this year?
I think making a plan for yourself on Ash Wednesday in terms of how you're going to encounter people. We're going to be probably masked on Ash Wednesday in our churches. Or community centers or wherever we're celebrating an Ash service or Mass. First of all, learn how to smile through the mask, like with your eyes, making that chance to just kind of look at a person and be able to greet them, ask their name. It's okay to tell people, can you remind me of your name again, or have we met yet? And I think it's okay to humbly admit, we need to reintroduce ourselves. So I think making a plan on that Ash Wednesday to look for at least one or two people that we haven't yet met, and how can we be a little bit more hospitable just sitting in the pew next to them or behind them. I think that goes along. That's a very simple thing. And imagine if, again, it's that what if scenario we were talking about at the beginning. What if every single person in the church made an effort to be warm and welcoming to every person in church? Then that community has got a very joyous Ash Wednesday. Sorry to say, it's a little bit of joy on that day. In fact, I even encourage people, like when they get up in the morning on Ash Wednesday, have a little spring in your step. I know it's not a normal thing to think about on a midwinter Wednesday in Lent, but get excited, because the thing that you've probably been wondering about all year, when will people come back? When will I see more people in church? For one day, God says, you got it. I'm answering your prayer today. There will be crowds, and enjoy it. Spring in your step, and greet those people as you would greet Christ.
I think that's probably one of the simplest but most important things we can do. And I hope that whether our listeners are individual parishioners or parish staff, that they can enter into that. We've only got about 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure people know, where can they find Hope from the Ashes if they would like to read this great book themselves?
That's great. Well, they can certainly, obviously, find it through many of the online booksellers, which we name nameless, but there are many out there. But they can also go to paulistpress.com and just search for Hope from the Ashes. Paulistpress.com. If they go there, they can order the book straight from the website. If they're ordering for a group, there are some group discounts. So inquire at Paulist Press if you're with a parish or a community and you want to get 5 copies, one for each of your parish council members or your staff. It's all right there. So yeah, paulistpress.com is going to be the easiest, and it might even get you some discounts as well if you're ordering in bulk.
I know that was one of the things I thought about, that if I was still in my director of formation role at the cathedral, this would have been something I would have wanted to get for the whole commission, so that we could have really thought about and plan ahead for future seasons, because it is very readable. That sometimes there's books written for ministry that are a little dense, but this was something that I felt would be very approachable, whether it is a parishioner who's a volunteer or a staff member looking for great ideas. So thank you so much for your time. And again, we're grateful to have you, Paul, with us, Paul Jarzembowski, the author of Hope from the Ashes. And we wish you every blessing, because I hear this is also going into its 2nd printing already. So congratulations on that.
Yes. No, very happy about that. And yeah, everyone just have hope. There is hope.
Definitely.
And that's, I think, the good news.
That most definitely is. And so thank you so much for joining us. And we thank our listeners for listening to On the Wave.
Can a blind man finally see the light? Can a blind man finally see the light? Well, if you were in the dark your whole life, could you tell what the light looks like? Can a blind man finally see the light? Well, I'm on my way. I can't get there on my own. Heaven's gate, no one's getting through alone. As I wait for you to come and take me home, I'm a walking in the light with you, the kingdom come. Can a dead man come back to life? Can a dead man come back to